The city was drowning. Rain hammered against the glass of skyscraper windows, turning the streets below into dark, rushing rivers. Thunder cracked overhead, a whip crack that made the whole world jump. It was a night for staying inside, for locking the doors and pulling the curtains tight. A night where shadows seemed to grow longer, deeper, and full of secrets. But on a night like this, when the world was hiding, something was delivered, something silent and strange. 5 envelopes, thick and heavy, made of paper as black as a moonless sky. They appeared on doorsteps and in mailboxes as if by magic, each bearing a single elegant seal, a silver wolf howling at a sliver of a moon. Inside each envelope, the message was the same. The words were written in shimmering silver ink, a stark contrast to the darkness of the card. It was an invitation to a dinner party that very night. The location was a place none of them had ever heard of, Chateau Nocturne. The instructions were simple yet unsettling. Arrive at midnight, come alone, a car would be sent. There was no name signed at the bottom, no host to thank or to question, just that strange silver wolf seal which seemed to stare right back at you, its silent howl promising an evening unlike any other. Who would send such a thing? And why on a night like this? The rain fell harder, as if trying to wash the mystery away. The invitation felt cold to the touch, colder than it should have. It was heavier than simple paper, carrying the weight of an unspoken command. It wasn't a request, it was a summons. For the 5 people who held these cards, a feeling of unease began to creep in. It was a strange mix of curiosity and fear, a pull they couldn't ignore, the kind of feeling you get when you're about to turn the page in a scary book, even though you know you probably shouldn't. The storm outside raged on, a perfect soundtrack for the beginning of a terrifying tale. Each crash of thunder seemed to punctuate the question that hung in the air. What was Chateau Nocturne? And what did its master want with them? The city lights blurred behind the sheets of rain, creating a world of distorted colors and strange shapes. It felt like the city itself was trying to hide the chateau from view, to keep its secrets locked away in the storm. But the invitations had already found their way. The spell had been cast. 5 separate lives, all busy, all important, were about to intersect in the most peculiar way. They didn't know each other. They had nothing in common, or so they thought. But they all shared one thing now. They all held a ticket to a midnight dinner, a dinner that promised to be much more than just a meal. The night was young, and the mystery was just getting started.
The first invitation found its way to Julian Croft, the tech billionaire. He lived in a penthouse that looked down on the entire city, a glass cage filled with blinking lights and humming servers. Julian was a man who controlled information. He knew everything about everyone. But this invitation? It was a blank spot in his data, a puzzle he couldn't solve. He paced his sterile white apartment, the black card, a dark stain in his perfect world. He prided himself on being 10 steps ahead of everyone else. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was walking into a trap with his eyes wide open. His curiosity, however, was stronger than his caution. He had to know.
Miles away in a dimly lit mansion filled with faded movie posters, Beatrice Vane held the same black card. She had once been the world's biggest movie star, her face known in every corner of the globe. Now she lived a quiet life, surrounded by ghosts of her glamorous past. The invitation felt like a script for a new movie, a mystery she was being asked to star in. A part of her was thrilled. It had been so long since she had felt the excitement of the unknown, the thrill of a grand entrance. She traced the silver wolf with a perfectly manicured finger, a slow smile spreading across her face. Perhaps the final act of her life was about to begin. She would, of course, wear her finest dress.
Dr. Alistair Finch, a retired surgeon, received his invitation in his quiet, book-lined study. His hands, once steady enough to save lives, trembled slightly as he read the words. He was a man of logic, of science and fact. This invitation defied all of it. It was illogical, emotional, and reeked of theatrics. He had spent his life cutting away mysteries, leaving no room for doubt. yet here was a mystery delivered right to his door. He felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, the same feeling he used to get before a difficult operation. This was a problem to be solved, a body to be dissected. He would go, not for the food or the company, but for the diagnosis. He needed to understand the sickness behind this strange affair.
The city's most feared food critic, Antoine Dubois, found his invitation slipped under the door of his restaurant after closing time. He was a man who could build or destroy a chef's career with a single sharp-tongued review. He sneered at the card. Chateau Nocturne. He had never heard of it, which meant it was either brand new or not worth knowing. The lack of a host's name was an insult. It was amateurish. Still, the quality of the cardstock, the elegance of the calligraphy, it hinted at a budget that could not be ignored. Perhaps some upstart chef was trying to make a name for themselves. Antoine scoffed. He would attend if only to have the pleasure of writing the most devastating review of his career.
As the clock tower in the city center began its slow, heavy chime for midnight, 5 identical black cars slid through the rain-slicked streets. They were long, old-fashioned vehicles, the kind you only see in old movies. They moved with a silent, ghostly grace, their headlights cutting twin beams through the downpour. Each car pulled up to a different address, waiting patiently for its passenger. There was no driver to greet them, just a back door that swung open on its own, an invitation into the dark, plush interior. It was another strange detail in a night that was already full of them. A car with no driver? It was like climbing into a coffin on wheels. Julian Croft hesitated for only a moment before sliding into the back seat. The door clicked shut behind him, plunging him into a deep, velvety darkness. He immediately reached for his phone, but there was no signal. A dead zone. How was that possible in the middle of the city? He felt a prickle of annoyance. He was cut off, blind.
Beatrice Vane, on the other hand, sank into the seat with a dramatic sigh, enjoying the strange romance of it all. She felt like a character in a Gothic novel, being whisked away to a secret rendezvous. The lack of a driver didn't bother her at all. It simply added to the mystery. She peered out the window, but the rain was too thick to see anything but blurry, distorted lights.
Dr. Finch climbed into his car with a grim determination. He ran his hand along the leather seat, analyzing the material. It was old, but impeccably maintained. He noted the lack of any modern features. No screen, no radio, not even a button to lower the window. It was as if the car itself was from another time. He leaned back, his mind racing, trying to form a hypothesis. Was this a kidnapping, a prank, an elaborate social experiment? Every possibility seemed equally likely and equally absurd. He felt his pulse. It was steady. Good. He would remain calm. He would observe. He would wait for the host to make a mistake.
Antoine Dubois grumbled as he settled into the car, annoyed that the vehicle wasn't a newer, more luxurious model. The ride was unnervingly smooth, however. The car glided through the city streets and then onto darker, less trafficked roads. The journey seemed to take forever. The city lights faded away, replaced by the dense, dark shapes of trees. They were leaving the familiar world behind, traveling deeper into the stormy night.
Each of the 5 passengers, alone in their identical cars, stared out at the passing darkness. They were all heading to the same unknown destination, pulled along by a force they couldn't see or understand. The silence inside the cars was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of rain on the roof. The cars finally slowed, turning off the main road and onto a gravel path hidden by overgrown trees.
The crunch of the tires was the first sound any of the guests had heard since their journey began.
Through the rain-streaked windows they saw it.
Chateau Nocturne.
It wasn't just a house, it was a castle.
A true, honest-to-goodness castle with stone towers that clawed at the stormy sky and narrow windows like suspicious eyes.
It was ancient and dark, a hulking beast of a building that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it.
A single flickering light burned in a high window, a lonely beacon in the immense darkness.
Lightning flashed, and for a terrifying second, the castle's silhouette was etched against the sky.
The cars pulled up one by one before a massive wooden door studded with black iron.
The doors to the cars swung open again, silently, expectantly.
As each guest stepped out, the cold, damp air hit them.
It smelled of wet earth, old stone, and something else. Something like decay.
They stood there for a moment, a small, isolated group of strangers huddled under the imposing shadow of the castle.
They looked at each other for the first time, recognizing faces from the news or from magazines, but saying nothing.
The tech genius, the movie star, the surgeon, the critic.
And one other, a woman who remained in the shadows, her face obscured.
The secretive investor, whose name was known but whose face was not.
They were an odd collection of people, brought together for a reason none of them could guess.
Julian Croft's usual confidence was gone, replaced by a wary curiosity.
Beatrice Vane clutched her shawl, a shiver running down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold.
Dr. Finch surveyed the group, his analytical gaze moving from one face to the next, already making notes in his mind.
Antoine Dubois simply looked unimpressed, though his eyes darted nervously toward the dark windows above.
The secretive investor, Elara, remained perfectly still, a statue in the rain, watching the others from beneath the brim of her hat.
They were all pieces on a chessboard, moved into position by an unseen hand.
Before anyone could speak, before they could question why they were all there, the great wooden door of Chateau Nocturne began to creak open.
It moved slowly, groaning like a waking giant, revealing not a warm, welcoming hall, but a gaping maw of darkness.
A deep, cold draft washed over them, carrying the scent of dust and extinguished candles.
There was no one there to greet them, just an open door and the promise of more mysteries inside.
They had come this far.
There was no turning back now.
One by one, they stepped out of the rain and crossed the threshold, leaving the modern world behind and entering the timeless, waiting darkness of the chateau.
The moment the last guest stepped inside, the heavy door slammed shut behind them with a deafening boom that echoed through the vast cavernous hall.
The sound was so final, so absolute.
It was the sound of a trap springing shut.
For a moment, they were plunged into near-total darkness, the only light coming from the occasional flash of lightning through the high, stained-glass windows.
The air was thick and musty, and so cold it felt like they had stepped into a tomb.
A collective gasp went through the group.
They were locked in.
There was no doubt about it.
The fun and games, if there ever were any, were officially over.
This was serious.
Then a voice cut through the darkness. It was a low, gravelly voice, smooth but with an unsettling edge like silk being dragged over stone. "Welcome to Chateau Nocturne." A figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the hall. He was a tall, unnaturally thin man, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that seemed to be woven from the darkness itself. His face was pale and gaunt, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to glitter in the dim light. He moved with a stiff, formal grace, his footsteps making no sound on the stone floor. "I am Gregor," he said, his lips barely moving. "I will be your host for this evening. Please follow me."
Host? I thought you were the butler. Who sent the invitations? What is this all about?
Gregor simply turned his head slowly, his glittering eyes fixing on the billionaire. He offered no smile, no expression at all. "All questions will be answered in due time," he replied, his voice calm and cold. "But first, we must insist on a small house rule. No modern technology is permitted within the chateau." He held out a silver tray. "Your phones, if you please. They will be returned to you upon your departure."
The request was polite, but the tone made it clear it was not a request at all. It was an order.
One by one, with visible reluctance, the guests placed their phones on the tray. It felt like giving up their last connection to the outside world, their only lifeline.
Dr. Finch noted that Gregor's hands were unnaturally pale, almost translucent.
Beatrice Vane tried to charm him with a dazzling smile, but the man's face remained a cold, emotionless mask.
Antoine Dubois huffed in annoyance but complied, not wanting to be the only one to refuse.
Elara, the investor, placed her phone on the tray without a word, her movements fluid and silent.
With their devices collected, Gregor gave a slight stiff nod. "Excellent," he said. "The dining hall awaits." He then turned and glided deeper into the shadows, expecting them to follow.
Gregor led them through a series of long, dark corridors.
The only light came from flickering torches set in iron sconces on the walls, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock them as they passed.
The air grew colder, and the silence was broken only by the faint, distant rumble of thunder and the soft shuffling of their own footsteps.
The walls were lined with enormous ancient paintings, their canvases dark with age.
Julian, used to bright modern art, found them oppressive.
They were all portraits of people, stiff and formal. But their eyes seemed to follow the guests as they walked by, full of silent warning.
The paintings were disturbing in more ways than one.
Dr. Finch, with his keen eye for detail, was the first to notice a recurring theme.
Each portrait showed a wealthy-looking individual or a grand noble family.
But almost all of them were depicted at a dinner table, surrounded by a lavish feast.
The tables were laden with roasted meats, exotic fruits, and glistening goblets of wine.
It was a celebration of wealth and abundance.
Yet there was always something wrong.
In the corner of one painting, a shadowy figure held a dagger.
In another, a skull was subtly hidden among a pile of fruit.
In a third, one of the smiling guests had eyes that were completely black, like empty pits.
Beatrice Vane, who had spent her life on movie sets, recognized the artistry.
It was masterful. Each painting told a story, but the story was always one of dread.
Feasts and death hand in hand.
She shivered, pulling her shawl tighter.
It felt like they were walking through a gallery of ghosts, each one telling them to turn back.
Antoine Dubois, the food critic, found himself studying the painted feasts with a professional eye.
The detail was incredible, but the mood was all wrong.
A feast should be a joyous occasion, but these paintings felt like last meals.
The food looked delicious, but it also looked deadly, as if it were poisoned.
As they walked deeper into the castle, the sense of being watched intensified.
It wasn't just the eyes in the paintings anymore.
It felt as if the very stones of the chateau were observing them, waiting.
The air was heavy with unspoken history, with the echoes of 1,000 tragic dinners.
Why would a host want to surround their guests with such grim and morbid art?
Was it a warning, a hint at what was to come?
The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, a maze of stone and shadows.
By the time Gregor finally stopped before a pair of towering oak doors, the guests were thoroughly unnerved, their initial curiosity curdling into a growing sense of fear.
Gregor pushed the heavy oak doors open, revealing the dining hall. It was a magnificent, breathtaking room.
A massive fireplace roared at one end, its flames casting a warm, flickering glow across the space.
In the center of the room stood a long, polished table made of dark, ancient wood.
It was set for dinner with gleaming silverware, crystal glasses, and fine china.
Candles in tall silver holders ran down the length of the table, their flames dancing and creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and eerie.
For a moment, the sheer grandeur of the room made the guests forget their fear.
It was a scene of incredible wealth and taste.
But then, the unease returned, colder and sharper than before.
The table was enormous, long enough to seat 20 people or more.
Yet, there were only 6 place settings.
5 of them were for the guests, their names written on elegant place cards.
Julian Croft,
Beatrice Vane,
Dr. Alistair Finch,
Antoine Dubois,
Ilara Vance.
They were all accounted for.
They looked around, expecting to see a 6th guest, perhaps their mysterious host who had summoned them all here.
but the room was empty, save for them and Gregor.
The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, as they stood awkwardly at the entrance.
Gregor gestured toward the table with a pale hand.
"Please be seated," he said, his voice as devoid of warmth as ever.
The guests slowly found their seats, the scrape of their chairs on the stone floor sounding unnervingly loud in the quiet room.
They sat in a small cluster at one end of the vast table, the empty chairs stretching out before them like a row of tombstones.
They looked at each other, their faces illuminated by the candlelight, their expressions a mixture of confusion and apprehension.
Where was the host? Why were there only 6 settings?
The questions hung in the air, unspoken but felt by everyone.
Then, Gregor did something none of them expected. He didn't retreat to the shadows or stand by the wall like a butler. Instead, he walked to the head of the table, to the sixth and final seat. He pulled out the chair and sat down, his movements precise and deliberate. He was not their butler. He was not just their host. He was one of them. Or was he? He sat there, a gaunt, dark figure at the head of the table, and looked at each of them in turn. A strange, thin smile finally touched his lips, a smile that did not reach his glittering eyes.
The 5 guests stared back, their hearts pounding.
The dinner was about to begin, and they were the main course in a mystery they couldn't possibly comprehend.
The invitation arrived without warning, a single envelope resting on the mantelpiece, its edges crisp, the handwriting elegant yet unfamiliar. There was no sender, no hint of who might have sent it, just a time, a place, and a name, Blackwood Manor. The air around it seemed to hum with secrets, as if the card itself was waiting for someone to accept its challenge. It was an invitation that felt more like a summons, impossible to ignore. 5 strangers arrived at the appointed hour, each one drawn by a mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and a sense of foreboding that clung to the evening air. The manor loomed before us, its windows dark and watchful, the grounds silent except for the crunch of gravel beneath our feet. None of us spoke as we approached, each lost in our own thoughts, wondering what awaited us inside those ancient walls.
We gathered in the grand dining hall, a cavernous space where shadows stretched across a table set for secrets. Candlelight flickered, casting long, wavering shapes on the walls, and the air was thick with anticipation. The table was laid with gleaming silver and crystal as if for a celebration, but the mood was anything but festive. Every detail seemed designed to unsettle, to remind us that we were guests in a place that thrived on mystery.
Arthur fidgeted with his cufflinks, unable to hide his nerves. Eleanor sat rigid, her back straight as a rod, eyes darting from face to face. Julian smiled too easily, his laughter brittle as if trying to mask his unease. Clara's jewelry flashed with every nervous gesture, her hands trembling as she reached for her glass. And I watched them all, the outsider, feeling the weight of their secrets pressing in from every side.
The staff moved like ghosts, silent and faceless, gliding between us with practiced precision. They served each course without a word, their expressions unreadable, their presence almost otherworldly. It was as if they were part of the house itself, extensions of its will, watching and listening without ever truly being seen.
The house seemed to listen, every creak and sigh echoing through the halls, as if the walls themselves were alive and aware of our presence. Shadows shifted in the corners, and the flicker of candlelight played tricks on our eyes. It felt as though we had stepped onto a stage, each of us playing a part in a performance we'd unwillingly joined, the script unknown and the ending uncertain.
Our host, Mr. Allister, appeared at last, tall, ageless, his presence both commanding and chilling. He entered the room with a measured grace, his eyes cold and assessing, his smile thin as a blade. There was something timeless about him, as if he had always belonged to this house, and we were merely passing through his domain. His gaze lingered on each of us in turn, as if weighing our worth or perhaps our secrets.
As the first course arrived, a hush fell over the table. The clink of silverware sounded unnaturally loud in the silence. Unease settled over us like a heavy fog, a cold premonition of the night ahead. We exchanged uneasy glances, each of us wondering what had truly brought us here and what memories might be awakened before the night was through. The servers placed before us not just food, but memories, each dish a key to our most private moments. As the plates arrived, the air thickened with anticipation and unease. The clink of silverware was almost deafening in the hush, as if everyone sensed that this meal was unlike any other. Each course was more than a culinary creation. It was a portal, a carefully chosen artifact from our pasts, designed to unlock emotions we thought long buried.
My plate held a star-shaped sugar cookie, my grandmother's recipe, lost to time. The scent alone transported me to her warm kitchen, where laughter and love once filled the air. But now the cookie felt like a relic, a bittersweet reminder of what I could never reclaim. Across from me, Arthur stared at charred toast, his hand trembling as he picked it up. I saw the pain flicker in his eyes, a memory of a childhood morning gone wrong, perhaps, or a moment of loss he'd never spoken of. The food was more than sustenance. It was a mirror, reflecting our hidden wounds. Eleanor's oyster brought tears. She wept quietly, the shellfish conjuring a memory only she could see. Julian's marzipan bird, delicate and broken, shattered his mask of charm, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. Clara tasted her tart and recoiled in horror, whispering, "It tastes of the fire." Her voice trembled, and I realized that each of us was being forced to confront something deeply personal. Regrets, traumas, and joys all mingling on our plates. The room was thick with emotion, every bite a confrontation with the past.
We realized these were not random dishes. They were our memories served up for scrutiny. Each plate was impossibly personal, dredging up joy, grief, and terror. It was as if someone had peered into our souls and chosen the one flavor that would unravel us. The shock on our faces was unmistakable. Some guests sat frozen, unable to touch their food, while others poked at it as if afraid it might bite back. The table, once a symbol of togetherness, now felt like a stage for our most intimate revelations.
We were not guests, but subjects, our souls laid bare for an experiment we never agreed to. The boundaries between host and guest, between past and present, had dissolved. We sat in the dim light, exposed and vulnerable, our secrets served up for all to see. The weight of unspoken stories pressed down on us, and the room seemed to shrink with every passing second. The reckoning had begun. The room fell silent, fear replacing nostalgia. No one dared to speak, as if words might summon more memories from the shadows. We exchanged uneasy glances, each of us wondering what would be revealed next, and whether we would ever be the same again.
Mr. Allister watched his guests with a peculiar satisfaction, his eyes glinting in the flickering candlelight. The room was heavy with anticipation, shadows dancing along the ornate walls. "The soul has its own appetites," he intoned, his voice low and deliberate, echoing off the high ceilings. "Food is merely a vessel for deeper hungers, for cravings that go far beyond the body." His words seemed to hang in the air, unsettling and cryptic, as if he spoke not just to the guests, but to the house itself.
Arthur's voice trembled barely above a whisper. "What is this? Why torment us like this? What do you want from us?" His hands shook as he gripped his glass, knuckles white in the dim light.
The host leaned forward, his face half hidden in shadow. "Not torment, awakening," he replied, his tone almost gentle, yet chilling. "This house feeds on strong emotions. Tonight you are the feast. Your fears, your secrets, your pain, they are what sustains this place. You are not here by accident."
Eleanor's defiance flickered in her eyes, though her voice wavered. "Why us? Why choose us for this ritual?"
The host's gaze lingered on her, unblinking. "I study what haunts us," he said softly. "The house craves what you feel most deeply. It is drawn to those who carry burdens, who hide wounds beneath polite smiles. Tonight, your emotions are the main course."
His words blurred the line between host and predator, between house and living thing. The atmosphere thickened, as if the walls themselves were listening, hungry for every whispered secret and every tremor of fear.
The implication was monstrous. Our pain was nourishment. We realized with growing horror that every anxious glance, every shiver of dread was being devoured by something unseen.
Fear settled in, heavier than any meal. It pressed down on us, making it hard to breathe, as if the very air was thick with menace.
"You are providing a feast," he repeated, his eyes glinting with a strange hunger. "The house is grateful for your presence, for your honesty, for your terror."
In that moment, the true nature of our invitation was revealed, and it was terrifying. We were not guests, but offerings, drawn here to satisfy a hunger older and deeper than any of us could have imagined. The house, the host, and the night itself seemed to close in, leaving us with the chilling certainty that escape was no longer possible.
Julian stood abruptly. "I'm leaving." He strode to the doors, locked, immovable.
Panic rippled. Arthur rushed to the windows, sealed tight.
The staff had vanished, the kitchen door stayed closed.
We were trapped. The dining hall transformed from elegance to cage.
We searched for exits, pressed on walls, pulled at drapes, nothing yielded.
Clara sobbed quietly. Despair settled over us.
The house was impassive, its secrets locked away.
The feast was a lure, the invitation a trap. Our fate was sealed. With every exit sealed, the house itself became our captor.
The chandelier pulsed like a heartbeat. Shadows twisted, the air grew colder.
The house made purposeful noises. Whispers slithered from the walls, scratching behind the wallpaper.
A porcelain doll on the mantel turned its head, its eyes fixed on us.
The objects in the room became extensions of the house's will.
The house was aware, savouring our terror.
The whispers grew louder, almost forming words. The mansion was alive, and it was hungry. Our eyes were drawn to the portraits lining the walls, stern ancestors, their gazes following us.
Arthur gasped. The man in the ruff, he blinked.
We watched as the portrait's expressions shifted, mourning, judgment, cruelty, mirroring our own fears.
The ancestors were not just watching, they were judging, their faces twisting with our anxieties.
The room felt smaller, the air thick with history as the portraits leaned out, pressing in.
These were not just paintings, but warnings.
The line between the living and the dead was vanishing.
We were becoming part of the house's haunted legacy. The house's presence grew, lights flickered, a deep hum vibrated through the floor.
The air thickened, cold and metallic, as if the house itself was exhaling decay.
The temperature dropped, cold spots drifted, and a slow, rasping breath filled the room.
Candle flames dipped and flared with each inhalation and exhalation.
We realized we were inside a living organism, suffocating in its lungs.
Our fear was its oxygen, our despair its food.
The supernatural was not in the house was the supernatural. We were being consumed. Fear fractured us, suspicion bloomed.
Julian accused Eleanor. You knew something. Did you bring us here?
Eleanor denied it, but doubt had taken root.
Clara turned on Arthur. Maybe this is your house. Maybe you're enjoying this.
Arthur's denial sounded hollow.
Paranoia spread. Every glance, every word became suspect.
The house's whispers mocked us, the portraits smirked.
We edged away from each other, isolated by distrust.
The house no longer needed to frighten us. We were doing its work, tearing ourselves apart. We were 5 strangers, now enemies, and the house watched and fed. The nightmare was complete. No escape, only fear and suspicion.
Shadows clung to us, the darkness inside matching the darkness around.
The supernatural became the backdrop to our unraveling minds.
We stood apart, weapons in hand, ready to turn on each other.
Mr. Alistair was gone, but his feast continued, our terror the main course.
The house breathed, waiting for the final blow.
We waited in the flickering dark, trapped between the supernatural and our own crumbling sanity. The dinner would never end. We were forever the guests at a feast of dread.
The silver cloche was lifted. Silence fell. On the platter, raw, dark meat, veined with white fat surrounded by river stones. The scent was metallic, primal, utterly out of place on fine china. Our host watched us, waiting. The meat seemed to pulse under the chandelier. Mrs. Gable's hand froze mid-reach for her wine. We stared, trapped in a silent, shared horror. No one dared speak. The host picked up a fork and knife, slicing the meat with a wet sound. A dark liquid pooled on the platter. He served each of us a trembling raw slice. The meat looked like a wound on my plate. Regret knotted in my stomach. The host did not serve himself, he just watched. The room felt colder, the fire distant. We were no longer guests, but participants in something terrible. The polite chatter was gone, replaced by suffocating dread. We sat, isolated, each with our own plate of raw flesh. Mr. Abernathy broke the silence. "What is this? Is this a joke?" He pushed his plate away. The host smiled thinly. It is as it should be. Mr. Sterling, the food critic, poked the meat. It's not beef, not venison, it's unfamiliar. We searched for answers but found only fear. One by one, plates were pushed back, forks set down. No one would eat. Our host watched, amused as if observing insects. Defiance mixed with regret. We would not play his game. Mr. Sterling stood. This is an insult to us, to cuisine. This is not food. The host's smile widened. You are here to judge, Mr. Sterling. So judge. Or are you afraid? The challenge hung in the air. Sterling's face reddened, trapped between pride and terror. The air thickened with our refusal. We clung to civility, but fear gnawed at us. The host's gaze never wavered. We were united in protest, but divided by dread. The meat sat untouched, a silent threat. The host's eyes glinted with something unreadable. Our refusal was met with chilling patience. The room felt smaller, the night darker. We waited, breathless, for what would come next. Mr. Sterling tried to reply, but terror froze him. He stared at his chair, then vanished. The chair crashed to the floor, empty. Where he'd stood, a growing dark stain, a single empty shoe. Panic erupted. Guests scrambled back, chairs toppled. The host remained seated, calm as if expecting this. The room felt like a cage. The windows reflected our terrified faces. The raw meat mocked us from our plates. Sterling was gone, impossibly, utterly gone. We had all seen it. The air was cold where he'd stood, a strange draft swirling. Horror replaced regret. The rules of the world no longer applied. We were trapped in a place where a man could simply disappear. The host's eyes lingered on the empty space. No one dared move. We realized this was only the beginning. Panic faded to stunned silence. We huddled together, far from the head of the table. No one looked at the blood or the empty space. The host sat unmoving, a statue at his feast. Shadows danced on the walls, the room a tomb. Regret gnawed at us. Was this our punishment for refusing? The raw meat glistened, redder than before. Had we made a mistake? The other guests' faces mirrored my fear. We were strangers, now bound by terror. The host finally moved, spearing a piece of meat. He held it up, then ate, chewing slowly. The sound was wet, deliberate. We watched, horrified, wondering who would be next. Regret was all we had left.
The old Blackwood Manor loomed over our town, abandoned and rumoured to be haunted. My friends Leo, Maya, Chloe and I dared each other to explore it, craving a thrill on a dull summer day. The front door groaned open, revealing furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts waiting for us. In the living room, a polished record player sat on a rickety table, oddly clean amid the dust. A blank black vinyl was already on the turntable. Leo, always reckless, approached and ran his finger over the record. A chill crept up my spine. It felt like we were being watched. Leo grinned and dropped the needle. Static crackled, then grew louder, harsh, like angry whispers. We leaned in, curiosity battling fear. Then the real sound began. Instead of music, a guttural sound oozed from the horn, followed by a cold whisper we couldn't understand, but it radiated pure hate. Maya gasped, Chloe clutched my arm, and the room turned icy. Then came the screams, agonized, desperate, as if someone was dying right there with us. A voice sobbed, "Please help me, make it stop." It felt alive, not a recording, but a soul trapped in the vinyl. Leo's bravado vanished. He reached to stop the record, but the whispers grew furious, swirling from the walls. The screams intensified, battering our minds. We were trapped, forced to listen to a nightmare. Our adventure had become a horror. We were no longer explorers, but prisoners. The sound pressed in from everywhere. We looked at each other, terrified. The show had only just begun. "Turn it off!" Chloe screamed. Leo yanked the needle away. Blessed silence for a second, but the whispers returned, growing louder, even with the record stopped. The screams and begging voices echoed from the very walls. In panic, Leo smashed the record player against the fireplace, shattering it and the vinyl. We stared at the wreckage, desperate for quiet. But the sounds didn't stop. The house itself was alive with the noise, mocking us. We realized the horror wasn't in the record, it was in the house, and the house wasn't letting us go. The ghostly concert played on, relentless. We were the new audience. The nightmare deepened. The endless noise gnawed at our sanity. Leo clutched his head, screaming, "It's in my mind!" The lights flickered, plunging us into strobing terror. Shadows writhed on the walls. The house was toying with us. Maya sobbed. Chloe and I clung to each other, all of us on the edge. Suddenly, Leo bolted. Not for the exit, but deeper into the house, up the stairs. We hesitated, then followed, the screams and whispers chasing us. Each step creaked like a gunshot. "Leo!" Maya called, but only the endless sound answered. The lights died, leaving us in total darkness. We were blind, surrounded by horror, and we were not alone. Our phone lights barely pierced the upstairs gloom. We searched room after room, dread mounting. In the master bedroom, we found Leo on the floor, cold, eyes wide with terror. He wasn't breathing. Scratched into his forehead, one word: gluttony. The house had judged him for his reckless hunger for thrills. The screams now sounded triumphant. The house had claimed one of us. We realized this was no haunted record, but a hungry, vengeful house. We were still trapped with the darkness and the endless, punishing sound, and we all wondered who would be next. The dining room was a study in contrasts. Opulent yet heavy with unease. Gilded mirrors and crystal chandeliers sparkled, but their beauty only deepened the sense of foreboding that clung to the air. 5 strangers sat around a grand table, each clutching their own silence, brought together by a mysterious invitation. None of them knew the host, nor the true reason they had been summoned to this lavish, isolated estate. Small talk fluttered and died, unable to mask the tension. Every attempt at conversation seemed to echo off the marble walls and dissolve into awkward silence, as if the room itself was listening. Then the soup arrived, black, thick, and utterly void, absorbing the candlelight without a trace of warmth or aroma. Its surface was so dark it seemed to swallow the light, a liquid shadow in a porcelain bowl. The guests exchanged nervous glances, their unease growing with every passing second. Clara, the artist, trembled as she lifted her spoon. Her hands, usually so steady with a brush, now shook as if she sensed the soup's strange power. Dr. Finch stared at the soup, unable to diagnose its nature. He prided himself on logic, but this dish defied explanation, unsettling him more than he cared to admit. Marcus Thorne, the brash businessman, joked about squid ink, trying to break the spell. His laughter was forced, echoing too loudly in the tense room, but no one truly smiled. He tasted it first, the others following, resigned. Each guest hesitated, but curiosity and social pressure pushed them to try the strange dish. The soup was tasteless, neither hot nor cold, a nothingness that slid down their throats. It left behind a sensation of emptiness, as if something essential had been taken from them. As Eleanor, the librarian, set down her spoon, a cold dread crept into the room. She felt as if she had swallowed a secret, one that now pulsed inside her. Candlelight flickered, shadows twisted, and the ornate wallpaper seemed to writhe. The room itself appeared to shift, as if responding to the guests' growing fear. The black soup was not food, it was a catalyst. It was an invitation to something far darker than any of them could have imagined. They all felt it. Something inside them was being unlocked. Old memories, regrets, and hidden truths began to stir, rising to the surface like bubbles in a deep, dark well. The silence grew heavier, as if the room itself was waiting. Every breath felt measured, every heartbeat loud in the hush. Each guest sensed the presence of secrets, long buried, now stirring. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the walls themselves held their own stories. The meal was only the beginning. The true purpose of their gathering was just starting to reveal itself. The soup had opened a door, one that could not easily be closed, and what waited on the other side was already seeping in. The reckoning had begun, and none of them would leave unchanged. Dr. Alistair Finch was next, his name echoing through the tense silence of the room. The calm, silver-haired physician's hands shook as he was pulled, unwillingly, into his own nightmare, one he had tried so hard to forget. Suddenly, he was back in the harshly lit operating theatre, the sharp scent of antiseptic in the air, the beeping of a heart monitor growing frantic and insistent. A child lay on the table before him, a routine surgery, or so it should have been, until exhaustion and stress made his hand slip at the worst possible moment. In one fatal second, a vessel was severed, blood blooming, and the monitor's beep flatlined, echoing doom through the room. He watched helpless as the team made desperate attempts to save the child, his own horror and disbelief reflected in the polished steel of the surgical tools. Later, with trembling resolve, he remembered the lie he wrote in the medical notes. A rare complication, he'd claimed, his handwriting steady as ever, masking the chaos inside. He'd comforted the grieving parents in the sterile corridor, burying the unbearable truth beneath a mask of professionalism, offering hollow words and a gentle embrace. The vision forced him to feel the full, crushing weight of his guilt, a burden he had carried in silence for years. Dr. Finch sobbed, shoulders shaking uncontrollably, exposed as a fraud not just to the others but to himself. The other guests stared at him, their own fears momentarily forgotten, as the doctor's pain filled the room. The soup had not just shown him a memory, it had forced him to relive the agony, every detail sharper and more painful than before. The dining room, once elegant and inviting, became a confessional, heavy with secrets and regret. Around the table, anxious faces exchanged worried glances, realizing that their own secrets might soon be revealed. No reputation, no matter how carefully built, could shield them now. The truth was inescapable, and the walls seemed to close in. The confessions had only just begun, and the night promised to unearth even more hidden sins. Clara, the artist, was next. Her vision took her to her studio, sunlight and turpentine in the air. She saw her mentor, frail and trusting, asking for her help on his final masterpiece. Ambition twisted her hand. She sabotaged his work, dooming his legacy to decay. He died believing in his triumph. She watched his reputation crumble. The vision receded, leaving Clara in silent tears. Her secret was not blood, but betrayal born of envy. She looked at the others, shame etched on her face. The room felt like a tomb, haunted by ruined lives. As Eleanor began to tremble, a figure emerged from the shadows, his presence chilling the air and drawing every eye in the room. The candlelight flickered, as if recoiling from his approach. He did not simply enter, he materialized, tall and gaunt, his eyes burning with a cold, unyielding intensity that seemed to pierce the very soul of each guest. "Good evening," he said, his voice echoing in the tense silence. "I am Gregor, your host for this extraordinary night." He gestured to the black soup before them, its surface reflecting the dim light. "I trust you found the first course illuminating," he intoned, a faint, unsettling smile on his lips. Gregor circled the table, his presence absolute, each step measured and deliberate, as if he were both judge and executioner. "You believe you have eaten. You are mistaken. You have been shown," he declared, his words hanging heavy in the air. He paused behind each guest, his gaze cutting through their fear, lingering just long enough to make their hearts race. "You have seen the truth you tried to forget. The lies, the justifications, they're gone. Only what is real remains." He stood at the head of the table, hands clasped, commanding the room with a silent authority that brooked no defiance. "This is not a dinner party, this is a tribunal. The soup was the evidence, and you are all witnesses to your own truths. Now comes the verdict, and the verdict must come from you. There is no hiding from what you have seen." This meal is not about eating. It is about confessing. Only honesty will grant you release from this night. You will speak your secrets aloud to each other. Only then will this night end. The guests stared, shattered, their composure crumbling. Gregor's demand was clear: confession or oblivion. There would be no mercy for silence. The room was silent, the weight of truth pressing down. There was no escape, only the certainty of judgment. The reckoning was theirs to complete, and the burden of revelation grew heavier with every passing moment. The night was far from over. Shadows lingered, and the final confessions had yet to be spoken. Gregor's command, confess, hung in the air, heavier than any secret. To think a secret was one thing, to speak it aloud was another. The guests looked at each other, no longer strangers but co-conspirators in guilt. Their secrets, once private, now pressed against the surface, demanding release. Years of solitude and self-justification crumbled. In each other's eyes they saw their own damnation. There was no high ground, no innocence left. The tension was unbearable. To confess was to surrender the last shred of control. Gregor waited, the silent arbiter of their penance. Guilt had been a slow poison for each guest, hollowing out their lives. The black soup had not created the poison, it had brought it to a crisis. Their guilt was no longer private, it was a shared spectacle. The air was thick with shame, the poison now between them. Gregor's demand forced a choice. Keep the poison inside or let it out. To confess was to surrender, but also to survive. Guilt was a living force, a debt now called due. The only currency left was the truth. Payment was inevitable. Secrets are prisons we build inside ourselves. Each guest was a master architect of their own cell. The illusion of control was shattered by Gregor's dinner party. The black soup unlocked every door, exposed every hidden flaw. Secrets became shared property, binding the guests in mutual shame. The cost of secrecy was isolation, not protection. Their secrets had festered, feeding on silence. Gregor offered the only escape: confession, not erasure, but freedom from the secret's power. The darkness could only be dispelled by light. The air was thick with unspoken words, the storm of guilt ready to break. Gregor waited, patient and unyielding. The silence stretched until Marcus Thorne finally broke. He stood, trembling, and faced the others. "The alley," he said, voice raw. "It wasn't an accident. I hit him. I ran." The words hung in the air, ugly and true. A collective sigh passed through the room. The first confession had been made. The dam had cracked. Others would follow. Dr. Finch would name the child. Clara would admit her betrayal. Eleanor's secret waited. Confession would not bring forgiveness, but it would end their solitude. The power of confession was reclamation, not absolution. By speaking, they robbed their secrets of power. The reckoning had begun. In their brokenness, a faint glimmer of a new beginning appeared.
The room had grown quiet. The echoes of laughter and conversation now faded into a heavy, almost suffocating silence. Only Arthur and Eleanor remained at the long, polished table. The other chairs left vacant, their occupants having departed in haste, as if fleeing from something unseen. Two silent waiters, faces unreadable, glided forward and placed covered silver platters before them, then disappeared wordlessly into the shadows, leaving the pair alone with their thoughts. The air was thick with anticipation, every flicker of candlelight casting long, trembling shadows across the table. Arthur and Eleanor exchanged anxious, searching glances, each wondering what would come next, their nerves stretched taut. With trembling hands, they reached out and slowly lifted the domes, revealing the contents beneath. On each plate rested a dark, gelatinous disc, cold, glossy, and deeply unsettling, with their own names meticulously carved into the surface, as if marking them for something ominous. They stared in disbelief at their names, etched into this final, terrible meal, unable to look away from the chilling sight. What did it mean to be served oneself? To confront your own name in such a haunting way? The choice before them was simple: yet impossibly cruel. To eat or not to eat, knowing that either decision carried unknown consequences. The room itself seemed to hold its breath, every shadow and silence pressing in, waiting for their decision. The feast, in every sense, was over. The final test had begun, and there was no turning back. Arthur moved first. He picked up his fork, forcing a grim smile. "What else is there to do?" he muttered, voice brittle. He cut into the dark confection, lifting a piece with the first letter of his name. He ate. For a moment, nothing. Then, a flicker of orange light in his throat. The fire spread, consuming him from within. In seconds, he was gone, reduced to a pile of white ash. The plate before him was clean, his name erased. Arthur had faced himself and been incinerated by the revelation. Eleanor stared at Arthur's ashes. She looked at her own plate, her name gleaming in the dark jelly. To eat was to be consumed by her truth. She refused. With a steady hand, she pushed the plate away. The room changed. The ceiling split open, revealing a void of pure black. From the darkness, a massive mirror descended, framed in tarnished silver. It reflected only her, not as she was, but as a memory. Eleanor braced herself. She had not eaten her truth, but now she would have to face it. The confrontation she had avoided was now before her, larger than life. The test was not over. The mirror's image sharpened, revealing more than just a reflection. It was a portal to the past, a window into forgotten memories. Eleanor saw herself as a terrified child, hiding under a staircase, clutching her knees, trying to become invisible. The memory flooded her senses, the fear, the shouting, the silence that followed, echoing in her mind like a haunting melody. She watched her parents' shadows, the chaos above, the aftermath she'd buried for decades, now resurfacing with vivid clarity. The mirror forced her to feel the terror and loneliness of her younger self, emotions she had long tried to forget. She was both the woman at the table and the child under the stairs, two selves intertwined by time and memory. This was her core trauma, the truth she had refused to consume, a truth that had shaped her life in ways she never acknowledged. Arthur had been destroyed by his truth, a truth that had shattered his world and left him in despair. Eleanor was being forced to witness hers, to confront the pain she had hidden away, to face the reality she had long denied. The mirror demanded she look, remember, and finally see. She could not escape. The reckoning was now, and it was relentless in its pursuit of truth. The sight of her abandoned childhood self, so small and vulnerable, broke through every defense Eleanor had built over the years. Memories she had tried to bury surged up, raw and overwhelming, as she gazed at the image of her younger self, lost and alone. A scream tore from her, a sound of agony and release, echoing through the empty room. It was a cry that carried years of pain, regret, and longing, finally unleashed after being held back for so long. The mirror before her cracked, spiderwebbing with fractures, then exploded into a million glittering shards, each reflecting a fragment of her past. The pieces dissolved into radiant light before they could touch her, as if her pain was being transformed into something pure and weightless. The image of the little girl once trapped in the glass vanished, finally set free from her prison of memory. Eleanor had not consumed her truth, nor been consumed by it. Instead, she stood her ground, refusing to let the past define her any longer. She had faced her deepest fears, and in doing so, shattered their hold over her. The chains that once bound her spirit fell away. Darkness fell. The dining hall, the table, even Arthur's ashes disappeared, as if the world she once knew was being wiped clean. Eleanor stood alone in the void, the echo of her scream lingering in the silence, a reminder of what she had endured and overcome. One had been destroyed by truth, the other had broken free by bravely confronting it. The difference was not in what they faced, but in how they chose to face it. The feast was over. For Eleanor, it was not an end, but a beginning, a chance to step forward into the light, finally free to write her own story.
My eyes snapped open, jolting me from a dreamless void into a world of biting cold. The chill was immediate and merciless, gnawing at my bones, seeping through my skin, making every muscle tense and shudder. Instinctively, I tried to move, but thick, coarse ropes dug into my wrists and ankles, pinning me to a heavy wooden chair that scraped against the cold floor. Panic stabbed through me, sharp and sudden. I was a prisoner, trapped, helpless. But where was I? How had I gotten here? My memory was a fog, swirling with fragments I couldn't piece together. My head throbbed with a dull, relentless ache, as if I'd been struck. The air was thick, heavy with a scent that was both sweet and metallic, undercut by something savory, a grotesque blend that made my stomach twist with unease. My stomach growled, the sound echoing in the silence, reminding me how long it had been since I'd last eaten. I twisted in my seat, forcing myself to take in my surroundings. I was in a vast industrial kitchen, cold steel counters, looming shadows, and an eerie emptiness that pressed in from all sides. Pots and pans hung overhead, their silhouettes casting long, shifting shadows that danced in the flicker of a single buzzing bulb suspended from the ceiling. Every sudden clank from the ovens or the metallic rattle of a pan made me flinch, my nerves stretched thin, every sound amplified in the oppressive silence. I pulled at the ropes with all my strength, but they were expertly tied, unyielding, cutting into my skin, leaving me no hope of slipping free. Alone, trapped, my throat was so dry I couldn't even scream. The urge to call out was there, but no sound would come. Desperation clawed at me as I scanned the room, searching for any sign of escape, any tool, any hope. Then, in the deepest shadow at the far end of the kitchen, I saw it, a figure standing perfectly still, half hidden in darkness. I hadn't noticed them before, and the realization sent a jolt of terror through me. A chill ran down my spine, colder than the air itself. I was not alone. Someone was watching, silent and patient. And in that moment, with a certainty that froze my blood, I understood. My nightmare had only just begun. Whatever was waiting in the shadows was only getting started. The figure stepped from the shadows, silent, graceful, moving with a predatory elegance that sent a chill down my spine. Each step was measured, deliberate, as if he was stalking prey in his own domain. He was dressed as a chef, but not like any chef I'd ever seen. His uniform was jet black, made of a fabric so dark it seemed to swallow the light around him, making him almost blend into the gloom. The outfit clung to him, sharp and immaculate, as if he'd stepped out of a nightmare kitchen. But it was the mask that stole my breath, a grotesque collage of melted cutlery, twisted and fused together. Forks jutted out for cheekbones, their tines glinting menacingly, while spoons formed the hollow, empty sockets of his eyes, reflecting the faintest glimmers of light. A single gleaming knife had been shaped into a nose, its blade catching the light with every subtle movement. The mouth was a snarl of handles, twisted into a permanent, mocking sneer that seemed to dare me to look away. The chef glided closer, radiating cold menace, his presence filling the room with a suffocating sense of dread. Every inch he moved forward, the air seemed to grow colder, heavier. He didn't speak, just stared through those dark spoon bowl eyes, unblinking, unreadable, as if he could see straight through me. My heart hammered in the silence, each beat echoing in my ears, my breath coming in shallow, panicked bursts. I shrank back, but the ropes held me fast, biting into my wrists and ankles, a cruel reminder that escape was impossible. Who are you? I whispered, my voice barely more than a trembling breath, desperate for any answer, any sign of mercy. The chef tilted his head, bird-like, the mask flashing in the flickering light as if considering my question or savoring my fear. Without a word, he turned away, moving with eerie calm to a swinging door at the far end of the room, his footsteps soundless on the cold floor. He pushed it open, revealing a lavish dining room beyond, an opulent space bathed in golden light, with a table set for a feast. Laughter and voices drifted in. Guests, there were guests, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding just beyond their celebration. I was not the only one here. In the shadows, I could make out other captives, their faces twisted in fear, their eyes darting desperately for hope. The chef's silence was more terrifying than any threat, his stillness a promise of horrors yet to come. I was caught in a web, and the spider had just revealed the rest of its prey. The realization settled over me like a shroud. There would be no easy escape. The game was about to begin, and I was just another piece on his twisted board, waiting for my turn to move or be taken. The masked chef held the door as 4 guests entered, oblivious to me at first. A slick-haired businessman, a jeweled woman, a booming politician, and a young heiress, each exuding power and secrets. They admired the kitchen, their laughter echoing off steel. The politician noticed me first, his laughter dying as he pointed alarm. The others turned, faces shifting from smugness to shock. The festive mood evaporated, replaced by tense silence. They stared at me, then at the chef, confusion and fear dawning. The kitchen was no longer a place of celebration. It was a stage for something sinister. The chef watched, silent and unreadable. The party, it seemed, was just getting started, and I was the unwilling centerpiece. "Welcome!" The chef's voice boomed, metallic and distorted. "Please, do not be alarmed by our centerpiece." He gestured to me. The guests exchanged nervous glances, bravado gone. "What is the meaning of this?" the politician demanded. The chef chuckled, a sound like rattling silverware. "No joke, you are my guests of honor. Each of you was chosen for a reason." He led them to a table set for 4, gleaming with polished silver. "You all have something in common, a talent for escaping justice." The guests looked at each other, guilt flickering in their eyes. "You've dodged consequences, slipped through the cracks," the chef intoned, pointing at each guest and listing their sins. Ruined lives, deceit, betrayal. They weren't guests, they were prisoners, just like me. The chef's words hung heavy in the air. There were no accidents here, no coincidences, only judgment. The kitchen was now a courtroom, and the sentence was about to be served. No one could escape. The chef gestured to the table. "Please take your seats. The first course is ready." The guests sat, fear etched on their faces. The chef presented a tray of glasses filled with dark ruby liquid. "A toast," he announced, "to secrets, to the lies that keep you warm at night." The guests hesitated, hands trembling. "What is this?" the jeweled woman whispered. "A truth serum," the chef replied, "to help you appreciate the honesty of the meal to come." No one moved. With a sigh, the chef forced each guest to drink. Their fear melted into glassy-eyed emptiness. The businessman giggled. The heiress hummed a nursery rhyme. The chef watched, satisfied. "Now that we are all being honest, let the meal truly begin." He turned to the ovens, his plan unfolding. I could only watch, heart pounding. The guests were no longer in control. The chef was the master of ceremonies, and the truth was about to be served. There was no turning back. The chef opened an oven, releasing a wave of heat and a disturbing aroma. Roasted meat tinged with sweetness. The guests, drugged, were oblivious. With a flourish, the chef revealed a golden brown roast, garnished and glistening. "Golden greed," he announced, carving the meat. Gold coins, pearls and jewels spilled from within, ill-gotten gains cooked into the feast. The chef plated the grotesque servings and set them before the guests. "Eat," he commanded. Under the serum's influence, they obeyed, chewing gold and swallowing pearls. Their faces were empty, smeared with grease. This was no meal, it was punishment. The chef watched, a silent judge. Justice was being served, one bite at a time, and I was forced to witness every moment. The guests slumped in their chairs, their faces stained with regret and their eyes vacant, as if the weight of their choices had finally caught up to them. The once lively banquet hall was now shrouded in an eerie silence, broken only by the faint clatter of silverware falling from limp hands. In the shadows, the chef stood motionless, his presence dominating the room. Then, with a voice that cut through the silence, he spoke. "Now, the piece de résistance. The dish this evening has led to this very moment, a culmination of every secret and every sin." With a dismissive wave, he sent the guests away. "Their punishment is just an appetizer," he declared, his tone icy. "The main course is reserved for you, the one who watched it all unfold." His gaze, sharp and unyielding, burned through the mask, pinning me in place with a silent accusation. "Me?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "What did I do to deserve this?" The chef's laugh echoed coldly through the room. "You committed the greatest sin of all, inaction, silence in the face of suffering." He began to pace, circling me like a predator stalking its prey. "You saw injustice and looked away, pretending it wasn't your concern. You heard cries for help, desperate and pleading, and you chose to ignore them, turning your back on those in need. You knew the truth, held it tightly, and yet you said nothing. Your silence was your shield, but also your crime." My mind raced, searching for answers, for any justification that might save me, but every memory only deepened my guilt. I don't understand," I pleaded, my voice trembling. "Please, you have to believe me. I never meant for any of this to happen." The chef leaned in, his mask just inches from my face, his breath cold against my skin. "You will understand." Justice isn't just about punishing the wicked, it's about awakening those who choose to remain silent, forcing them to confront the consequences of their indifference. His words were a chilling promise, echoing in my mind like a curse I could not escape. In that moment, I realized I was not just a witness to these events. I was on trial, my own actions or lack thereof under scrutiny. The kitchen, once a place of creation and comfort, had transformed into my courtroom, every shadow a silent judge. The verdict was about to be delivered, the final judgment hanging in the air like a blade. There was no escape from judgment, no way to run from the truth that now bound me tighter than any rope. The chef's justice was absolute, unwavering, and I was next. The final course awaited, and this time, I was the one being served. The chef approached a stainless steel cart, draped in white cloth. He paused, then whipped the cloth away. The kitchen was silent, all eyes on him. "Every great dish needs a perfect centerpiece," he declared, "an ingredient full of life, a beating heart." My own heart seemed to stop. On the tray, nestled in ice, was a human heart still pulsing. I stared, mind refusing to accept it. It was pristine, impossibly alive. I felt a cold emptiness in my chest. I looked down, no blood, no wound, but the frantic drumming was gone. The heart on the tray beat steadily. Thump, 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 thump. It was my heart. The chef had taken it without a mark. I was hollow, a shell. The truth was undeniable. My silence had a price, and now I was forced to face it. The chef's lesson was about to be complete. The chef lifted the tray, presenting my heart like a trophy. "Behold, a heart that knows the truth but refuses to act, the perfect symbol of silent complicity." He walked toward me, each step echoing in the silence. The heart beat in time with his approach. He held it before me, my own heart exposed. Terror gave way to a cold calm. "Do you see it now?" the chef whispered, "the price of your silence. You watched others suffer and did nothing. So I took your heart so you could finally see what you were hiding." He leaned close. "This is not an execution. This is an education. This is justice." He placed the tray beside me, my heart watching me. The other guests stirred, eyes widening as they understood. The chef clapped, a metallic sound that made us all flinch. "And now," he announced, gesturing to the heart, "who is ready for dessert?" The kitchen was silent, the lesson complete. Justice at last was served.
All right, mystery lovers, let's break down the final chilling moments of Chateau Nocturne. The grand estate dissolves into mist. The credits roll, and you're probably thinking, that's it, right? But wait, there's more. Just as you're about to click away, the camera lingers, and suddenly a new set of envelopes clatters out of an old printer. No music, just the mechanical whir. Blink and you might miss it, but this detail is everything. So what does it mean? Let's rewind a bit. Throughout Chateau Nocturne, the envelopes were the heartbeat of the story, delivering clues, threats and secrets, always tied to the shadowy past of the mansion's guests. When the house finally disappears, you'd expect the story to end, but those envelopes suggest something darker. Is the cycle starting again? Is there another set of victims, or maybe even a new mastermind behind the scenes? The fact that the printer keeps working hints that whatever haunted Chateau Nocturne isn't gone, it's just changed form. I love how the creators leave us with more questions than answers. Was the real trap the mansion or the secrets everyone brought with them? And if the envelopes have started over, does it mean no one ever truly escapes? Here's my favourite theory. The mist isn't just covering the estate, it's spreading the mystery, making sure the story never really ends. Maybe you, the viewer, are the next recipient. So, did you catch that secret ending? Or did it catch you? Drop your theories in the comments. Let's unravel this together. And remember, in the world of Chateau Nocturne, every ending is just another invitation.